What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Courtside Podcast here on the Basketball Network. If you don't know who I am, my name's Caleb, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host Connor. Connor, it's been a couple weeks, but we're back at it. How we doing?
Feels great to be back. I had to take a couple weeks absences. Caleb and I had a lot of personal stuff going on, but we're excited. A lot has happened. And a lot is about to happen in the basketball world that I'm excited to talk about today.
Yeah, same, man. As you mentioned, a lot of personal stuff going on, travel, a couple surgeries, but we're back and ready to get going. As always, we'll jump into the transition three. And as Connor mentioned, a lot has happened since we've been gone in the world of basketball, but none other than Cat being traded to the Knicks. That's Karl Anthony Towns going from the Timberwolves to the Knicks in the blockbuster trade that's sending Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, and a couple of other pieces back to the Minnesota Timberwolves. I was very surprised by this one, Connor, but what were your initial thoughts when you heard this news?
Yeah, definitely very confused. It kind of seemed like the Knicks were happy with what they had, and also kind of seemed like the Timberwolves were happy with what they had. This just kind of, came out of left field. I don't know, man. Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo. I honestly don't hate the fit with the Timberwolves.
Yeah, I was very surprised as well. From a Timberwolves perspective, like a team that just came off of, if not their best finish ever as an organization, now moving on from one of their franchise pieces in Karl Anthony Towns and moving him over to the Knicks. And then also from a Knicks perspective, one, I was really sad because Dante DiVincenzo no longer with the Knicks, so we're not going to see the Villanova Knicks like we were talking about and have been anticipating all offseason. And then also getting back Julius Randle. Not as good a shooter as Karl Anthony Towns. I feel like when you're playing next to Rudy Gobert, that's something you need. But there was obviously a reason that they're doing this. There was a lot of talks of Karl Anthony Towns getting traded in seasons past, and it must have been the right situation, the right time they felt. But huge news, excited to see what it looks like in the upcoming season. But from my perspective, just wasn't 100% interested in doing that if I were either of these teams.
Yeah, just a quick note. I think it is important to mention, which I don't think this is confirmed, but honestly, a big reason this trade could have happened was two things. One, the cap space is being there's no inflation, so it's just the same. So obviously, teams are still playing or still paying players more, but they don't have more cap space to work with. Obviously, Cat has that huge deal. But then also the NBA kind of has added some more restrictions on what teams can spend and on who. And so the Timberwolves kind of were in a rough spot financially, and clearing Cat out really helped them, which obviously not saying that's the reason they traded him, but it definitely probably factored into it when they were trading him.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly add on to that. I think we're going to see this a lot from other teams in the NBA as we're coming up. Teams are really becoming a little more handcuffed in the way that they have to build their teams now with the new kind of CBA that's been put in place, and you'll see this in years going forward. But yeah, as Connor mentioned, cap space is being limited, not necessarily going on the huge inflation that we have been seeing in years past, and also there's higher taxes that are incurred when you go into those first and second aprons than there were prior. And as you can see, this might have been where the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Knicks owners really weren't wanting to go into that, specifically the Timberwolves. So I do think we're going to see a shift in the way teams are being built compared to the back in the day when the Warriors were just didn't matter how much they were spending, they were going into the tax, but they were willing to do it. So big news, and we'll have to monitor that going forward. But another signing that actually just occurred was Wendell Carter Jr. signed a 3-year, $59 million extension with the Magic. This was reported by none other than Shams, who we're going to talk about next in the transition three. But this is going to continue his deal through the 2028-29 season. Bright player there in the Magic, and he's been really helping them in the last couple of seasons. So excited to see him get his bag here today.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of interesting. Obviously, we just talked about the financial adjustments teams are having to make. And I'm kind of interested, if this happens last offseason, Do you think this deal is worth a lot more?
Maybe. Uh, I don't know. I feel like the Magic, they already got Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero, and obviously they're not playing the center spot, but I think they had to solidify it with Wendell Carter Jr., but it could have been a lot more last season. So, at the end of the day, he does get his max extension, and it's, $82 million now through the end of the 2028-29 season, so he can't be complaining too much, right?
Yeah.
For sure. Well, moving on, as I mentioned earlier, last piece of news we have for the Transition 3 today is in regards to Shams, but we'll jump back to his predecessor. So, Adrian Wojnarowski, if you're in the NBA world, you know who this guy is. He is the guy that is just the ultimate NBA insider, breaks all the free agency and trade news and rumors. He has actually moved on from being ESPN's senior NBA insider, and it is now being replaced by Shams, who was previously under Adrian Wojnarowski at ESPN before he moved over to The Athletic. He's coming back to the ESPN ranks to now replace Woj, and we kind of see the passing of the torch moment there. Honestly, really sad to see Woj go. He was just such a big piece in the world of basketball and specifically in the NBA, but he's on to, bigger and better things, going back to his alma mater at St. Bonaventure. But now we got Shams, who he's been around for a while as well, and he's going to do great. But Connor, what was your thought on this? It was really bittersweet for me because ever since I've been following the NBA, Woj has been highly connected to it. But sad to see him go, but excited for him and his future endeavors.
Yeah, no, definitely bittersweet as well. I mean, Woj, kind of shaped the way that people report on sports. And honestly, like the access that he had, that I feel like so many people tried to model after him. It just seemed like hours before these deals were solidified or announced, Woj knew, and it was just, and people were just like, how did he know? But honestly, I feel like there's no one else who could have replaced him. I know there's a few names that were thrown out there, but I feel like we all kind of knew Shams was coming in to take his place, and rightfully so. I think he's earned it. He's also a phenomenal reporter. But just shout out Woj, man. It was a great run. But always supporting people who want to pursue what they want to. So yeah, but excited for Shams this season.
For sure. And for everybody that follows NBA as closely as we do, this is just a good note to make sure you might have to turn off those Twitter notifications for Woj, but make sure that they're on for Shams because, as we mentioned earlier with the Wendell Carter Jr. news, he's always going to be breaking them. So if you want to know exactly when it's happening, make sure to go turn those Twitter notifications on. Well, we'll jump into the rest of our episode today. And as we've been doing previously, we're jumping back into diving into all of the different NBA divisions, breaking down each of the teams, what moves they made in the offseason, and kind of what our thoughts and predictions are for them in the upcoming season. And for this episode, we have the Southeast Division of the NBA. So this is the Atlanta Hawks, the Charlotte Hornets, the Miami Heat, the Orlando Magic, and the Washington Wizards. And a quick reminder, we're breaking them down into 4 different categories. So they're either going to be listed as contenders, so contending for that NBA title, a playoff lock, maybe not contending for the NBA title, but they're going to make the playoffs for sure. Then we got our play-in and bubble teams, those teams that might need to make just one more move or are right on the cusp of making it into the playoffs, but we don't see much more. And then last, as always, we got the guys that are going to be taken for Flag, wanting to get that number 1 pick so we can see Cooper Flag maybe on their team next year. And so, as always, we'll jump.
Division full of contenders right here.
Hey, this might be the best division we've done yet, right? Well, we'll go ahead and jump into the first team. So we got the Atlanta Hawks. And just a reminder how they finished last season. They finished 10th in the East, so they made it to the play-in game, but lost in that first play-in game and ended with a record of 36-46, returning a lot of their core, but also had some key losses. So, Connor, I'll let you dive into that a little bit and then give me your initial thoughts on this team.
Yeah. So just kind of diving in, biggest name they lost, DeJounte Murray, traded him. But they also lost Wesley Matthews and Sadiq Bey. Losing a couple shooters. But obviously, pretty high draft pick, one might say. Got Zachary Risachet. They got Dyson Daniels as part of the trade, and Larry Nance Jr. as well. So kind of some role players that they got in that trade, and then they also got Cody Zeller in a sign-in trade. Not sure how much they'll use him. They kind of still have a lot of bigs on their roster, but I think the Hawks at the end of this season were kind of at a standstill. They made that trade for DeJounte Murray a few years ago. Um, and that was after they had made the conference finals as well. So people were like, oh, like they're kind of getting ready to be one of the best teams in the East. Never really, you know, did anything with it. Obviously, you got two really good guards in Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, but it just never seemed, no matter how much they played, they could gel together that well. But obviously, they decided Trae Young's their guy. They traded DeJounte Murray away, and kind of, I guess, they're focusing on Trae Young now. So honestly, I'm kind of excited for the Hawks. I think Trae Young excelled when he was the sole ball handler on the team. So I'm honestly kind of expecting some big things from them.
Yeah, as you mentioned, got rid of DeJounte Murray, which is, a little bittersweet because we like the player that he is, DeJounte Murray, but that Murray Young kind of experience didn't really work out the way that they were hoping. Just two ball dominant guys that couldn't get enough touches when they were both on the floor. So I agree, moving off from him was probably the right move and at the right time. But do have a lot of the key pieces: Trae Young, Bogdanovich, DeAndre Hunter, a bright spot last season in Jalen Johnson, expecting him to make some big steps this year, and then Clint Capella, as well as some of the other guys that they brought in, as you mentioned, just going to help them. For me personally, I'm going to put them in the play-in / bubble team. I think there's a lot of exciting things for this team, but without that second star that complements Trae Young well, I don't think this team's really going to do anything else. But I also could see if early in the season that they're struggling, they might start tanking a little bit as well. But for me, I'm putting them in the play-in / bubble slot. But I am interested to get your opinion, Connor. Zachary Risachet, number 1 overall pick. What are we thinking about him? What's our expectations for the season?
I I'm not gonna lie, I'm not sure how much he's going to get used, just because he didn't really go to. Typically the number one pick goes to one of the worst teams in the league. The Hawks were not one of the just absolute worst teams in the league. They, as we've mentioned, they have a pretty full roster at most of their positions. So for me, I'm kind of interested to see how much playing time he actually gets.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, when we saw him and his flashes in the summer league, it didn't look great. It didn't look bad. It just kind of looked meh. So I don't expect him to get a ton of run, but obviously, if you're drafting someone number 1 overall, you got to assume they're at least going to somewhat be in the rotation for the Hawks. But kind of looking at their lineup, maybe the backup small forward, power forward is where we're seeing him. But yeah, for me personally, even though he was the number 1 overall draft pick, I don't think he's going to be competing for the Rookie of the Year because, as you mentioned, he didn't go to one of those really bad teams in the league. He actually went to one that has been in the play-in consistently. So I don't think I'm necessarily expecting big things from Risachet, but he definitely could surprise me. But is there anyone else that they got this offseason that you think was a good get for them and someone that can help them in this upcoming NBA season?
So I'm not sure how much he'll play, just because once again he's in that forward position. But Dyson Daniels, I actually really like him. Which I know he's also kind of listed as like a guard as well. But his rookie year, he was a really good 3-and-D player. Um, and I think in the right situation, like that's where he thrives. Um, which 17 minutes a game last year, didn't get a whole lot of playing time. Only played in 22 minutes per game last year. Um, and 61 games played. Not a whole lot of opportunities for him, but he's definitely someone who can for sure help them.
Yeah, I agree. I like the Dyson Daniels get as well. Young guy, only 21 years old, out of Australia, but we have seen increases in his numbers, specifically field goal percentage last year. So I do think he's going to get some run. And honestly, looking at this team, besides Trey Young, this team is pretty big. Like their guards are big. They're playing everybody that's probably like 6'6" and above outside of Trey Young. So it's going to be a fun, athletic and long team. But again, just looking at the rest of the East and what they have to go up against in terms of playoffs, I just don't think much else. I'm kind of expecting the 9 or 10 seed again this year.
Yeah, I'm definitely a playoff lock, or sorry, play-in lock. Um, I think if they play at their potential or at their ceiling, they can get to a 6 seed. But yeah, I'm kind of expecting probably a 10 to 8.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, moving on to the next team, we got the Charlotte Hornets. Last season, they finished 13th in the East, had a record of 21-61. I will say this was highly due to a lot of injuries that this team has, but their returning core. They got the star and LaMelo Ball, followed along by Miles Bridges, Brandon Miller, their rookie from last year, Mark Williams, and then they got Cody Martin and Trey Mann. Didn't make a whole lot of noise this offseason with any big additions or losses. Added Josh Green and the trade or from free agency, and then also got Keontae Johnson, and then some of their losses and included Davis Bertans and Poku. So again, would have liked to have seen the Charlotte Hornets make a lot more moves this offseason just to better the team. They do have a very fun young core and a very fun team to watch. I mean, LaMelo Ball and Miles Bridges, I know from a couple of years back, were just an absolutely electric. So hoping that we see less injuries there and we're able to see them go back at it. But again, just not necessarily a contender that we would see, and I don't think we're going to see many in this division either.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the biggest thing not the biggest thing, but one of the biggest things is they probably want their young core to gel together, and I think they're expecting a lot of their players to take leaps. Um, Mark Williams and Brandon Miller are the probably two noticeable young players that I want to mention. Both have played well. Brandon Miller more so has played extremely well. Um, Rookie year did phenomenal. And then Mark Williams is a really good defender, and he can dunk it when he needs to. He's kind of one of those Clint Capella players who will dunk it, and just play solid low post defense. That wingspan is huge. But most important thing for them is LaMelo Ball. LaMelo has only played more than 60 games once in the 4 years. Sorry, he only has played more than 50 games once. I guess his rookie year he played 51. Then his sophomore year is the only time he's ever played. He played 75 games, but the past 2 years combined, he has only played 58 games. And it's hard to take this team seriously when your best player can't play.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm begging that we have a season where LaMelo Ball is actually going to be able to play an entire year. Obviously we're not going to get the 82 games anymore because we just don't see that, but hoping to see, in the 70s again this season as we did in his sophomore year. But if you look at the averages, I mean, even though he didn't play as much the past couple of years, like he's going up in every single category. And I think, especially with this type of team, in order for them to have any success, we're going to need to see LaMelo Ball have another all-star type season. I definitely think he's capable of it. It's just a thing of injuries, right? Is he going to be able to stay on the floor? Because we haven't been able to see that in years past. And then I agree, you hit it right on the head with Brandon Miller. Had an absolutely amazing rookie year. Feel like it was very overshadowed by Victor Wembanyama, obviously, and rightfully so, and Chet Holmgren. But I feel like Brandon Miller, you have to put him in the top three, maybe top five for sure, maybe top three rookies of last season. So to be able to see him and hopefully see him play alongside a LaMelo Ball a lot more this year is going to be exciting to see. And then I agree, Mark Williams, hoping to see some spurts out of him and some steps forward. I will mention that someone I didn't say earlier, they also have Grant Williams, which, we've seen him play key roles on teams like the Celtics and then recently on the Mavericks. So I think that's a kind of more of a veteran presence that's going to be able to help this team. But this team is young. I think this team's going to be really exciting. Now, whether or not they have a great season, that is very much up in the air. But with my optimism behind this team, if they continue to play well without any injuries, I'm actually going to put them in a play-in slot. Last season finished 13th, but that was, as Connor mentioned, without LaMelo Ball for the most of the year. So I'm going to move them up to that play-in bubble type team because I do think they have the pieces, specifically with LaMelo Ball, because I think he's just an amazing player and someone that's just going to make everybody else around him better.
Yeah, and completely agree. But I do want to mention one player that we haven't talked about, and that's Trey Mann. Um, he came in, he played 28 games last year. He got traded from OKC. But, when LaMelo Ball was out, which he was for most of the year, but when Trey Mann came in, he played 31 minutes, averaged 12 points on 45% shooting. And he also averaged 4.5 rebounds, 5 assists, and 1.7 steals. Obviously, gone to a lot of Oklahoma City games. He never got a whole lot of minutes there when OKC was healthy. But Trey Mann is such a good player, and he just gels really easily everywhere he goes. Which I know people might be worried about now that LaMelo's back. What is Trey Mann's role? But Trey Mann has played with Shea before. He's played with a ball dominant guard like LaMelo, and thrived when he got to play. So I'm excited to see Trey Mann on this team when LaMelo's there.
Yep. I agree with that one. I also think last person I'll mention, Nick Smith Jr. Wasn't a huge part of their rotation or anything last year. Was a rookie last year and played in 51 games and actually averaged 14 minutes, but had some really good splits, shot over 43% from the 3-point line. Seeing someone like that playing alongside LaMelo Ball, being able to space the floor and give LaMelo a lot more openings in the lane than obviously an avenue to kick it out to him to shoot. I think he can make some steps in the right direction. The one place that I see this team lack is two places I would say. One is they're just young, which isn't also always the worst thing, but with this team, just from the youth that they have, we kind of know they're not going to be contending for that NBA title, but they're young. But then also when it comes to the front court, I just don't know if they have a lot of pieces, so we're going to need to see guys like Grant Williams, Mark Williams, and Miles Bridges step up big time there.
Yeah, definitely. At their center position, they're pretty thin. Who do they have outside of Mark Williams?
Mark Williams, and then they have Nick Richards.
Yes, they got Nick Richards.
Harry Giles, guys that aren't going to be playing a lot. Actually, they just recently signed Taj Gibson, so that gives them some sort of veteran at the center spot that might be able to give him a few minutes here or there. But nothing notable or worth, actually diving into, I would say.
Yeah, definitely they're asking, or they will be asking a lot of Mark Williams this season. But hopefully he can rise up to the task. Definitely know he's capable of it. For me personally, I'm not going to say they're a play-in lock. I'm going to call them a bubble team. I think they have a lot to prove in this early season. My opinion can change if they come out the gates and they're playing well. But they just have yet to show if this is a team that can actually make some noise.
Okay, I agree there. We'll jump into the next team, and this is a team that's been around, and I feel like they're always someone that has to be talked about as, for sure being in the playoffs, but could make some noise as a contender. Not 100% sure I would go there, but that's the Miami Heat. So last season, they had a down year, I would say, for the Heat. Finished eighth in the East, and then obviously, when you finish eighth in the East, you go up against the Boston Celtics in the first round, and they lost 4-1. Finished with a record of 46-36, but their free agency was pretty much null and void. Didn't really do anything. They lost Caleb Martin. They added Alec Burks and Josh Christopher, so nothing really notable. Maybe Caleb Martin's a bigger piece or a bigger loss than we expect, but not too much. But have their majority of their returning core with Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Jaime Jaquez coming off a great rookie year, and then also you got Duncan Robinson, Terry Rozier, and Kevin Love. I think the Heat are primed for another playoff lock type of year. I just think they have great pieces, but looking at the other top teams in the East with the Celtics, the 76ers, and the Knicks, I'm just not 100% sure they're going to get over that hump to that contender status.
Yeah, I for sure don't have them as contenders. Um, they just don't have the pieces, or they didn't add any pieces or change anything. Which not necessarily saying you need to change something to win. But kind of after what we saw last year, it was just kind of like, oh, like it just kind of seemed like they were content with that. Um, but if there's one thing I think we've learned is never count out Jimmy Butler. I know he's kind of on the, or not kind of, he is on the wrong side of 30, a few years removed from it. Um, so, probably, I don't know, I would be surprised if he produces as efficiently in these next couple of seasons as he has been. And, you start to see, does this become Bam out of Bio's team rather than Jimmy Butler's team? I think for sure this season it's still Jimmy Butler's team. Um, but Kevin Love, I'm interested to see how much he has left in the tank. Um, it always seems like at the right moment for the Heat, he would get hot and hit a couple threes for them. Um, he's kind of like a Al Horford, just when you think like there's no way this dude's coming back for another season and actually contributing. And then lo and behold, he does it again. Um, but yeah, I definitely have them as a playoff lock. That's where probably a 6 or 5 seed is what I'm guessing from them.
Yep, I agree. I think this team is just obviously you got Jimmy Butler, you got Bam Adebayo, and those are your stars, but then the rest are just a lot of solid role players. Maybe we'll see a leap forward in Tyler Hero. I feel like we've kind of been saying that for the past couple of years when it comes to him. But he's kind of had a few seasons, last year specifically, plagued by injury. But obviously, we see him in the low to mid 30s in minutes, so I think he's going to just continue to play that type of role, but we might see him make a step forward there, and I think we're going to need to see that in order for them to get up to that contender type of status, but I agree. 5 to 6 seed, I think they're going to play better than they did this last year and finish better than an 8, but I don't see them going much further there. But I did have a question for you in terms of Miami. What are your expectations for Jimmy Butler in the sense of, do you think he stays with Miami the entire year? Because there have been some rumors that this might be the year where they actually look to move off of Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, honestly, it probably depends how the first half of the season before the trade deadline goes. I don't see them moving him before the trade deadline. Kind of don't know why you would move him before the trade deadline unless they just decide, oh, we for sure are wanting to move on. But I mean, definitely a possibility, as we just saw with the cat trade, as we talked about. We have no idea what's going to happen. Front offices make decisions all the time. Off stuff that we don't know, don't understand. Um, but yeah, I think the Heat have something to prove. I think they viewed last season as a fluke. I know, like you said, Tyler Hero dealt with injuries. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think they're definitely going to give it a shot, at least with him this season.
Yeah. And hey, one last thing I'll note because I think it's kind of important and good to frame up for the Heat. Not only do they have a great core and a good team there, but they have who is regarded from the NBA GMs actually as of a recent survey that just came out earlier today. They have the best coach in the league in Eric Spoelstra. I believe 71% of the NBA GMs that voted in that said that he was the best coach in the league. So can never count out the Miami Heat and that culture when you have a guy, at the head of it like Eric Spoelstra.
Yeah, he's a coach that just gets the most out of his players. You know, it seems like no matter who they bring in, he gets the most out of them, which I feel like you don't see that as often as you do in college. Typically teams they bring in players to fit with each other, but Eric Spoelstra just kind of seems to whatever he has, he makes magic with, you know? And it's just like incredible. And I mean, I think it's a well-deserved recognition from the GMs.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, he's kind of been like the Greg Popovich of the past, 5 to 10 years, I would say, like what Pop was doing with
Yeah.
San Antonio back in the early 2010s and, into the middle of the 2010s. That's kind of what Eric Spoelstra's been doing, it seems like. And because he just consistently has them in the playoffs and playing their best basketball, then it feels like.
Yeah, and I don't want to go on too much of a tangent because I think this can be a whole podcast in of itself, but I think it's just a great example of an organization giving a coach a chance. Because after LeBron left, he had a couple bad years, but they stuck with Eric Spoelstra because they believed in him. You know, instead, we see these coaches getting fired after one season because they didn't win a championship, and it's just like they're not even giving these coaches chances. Whereas Eric Spoelstra has been in a good environment where he's given the chance. He's proven, hey, look what I've done. He's gotten them to a couple more finals. Falling short in both of them, but got them to the finals nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time when you have LeBron James on your team, the organization kind of doesn't stick with the coach. It seems like Cleveland,
Hey,
Los Angeles,
Eric
but
Spoelstra is the only coach that has not gotten fired when LeBron is there. So,
hey, there you go. That I think it speaks for itself there. Great. Well, we'll move into our next team. We got the Orlando Magic, who actually had a great year last year, I would say. So ended up finishing fifth in the East, barely lost in the first round to the Cleveland Cavaliers in a big 7-game series. They lost obviously 4-3. Ended 47-35 and had a lot of good pieces there with the emergence of Franz Wagner, obviously Paolo Banchero, and they had their rookie in Anthony Black alongside some big pieces that stepped up in Cole Anthony and Jalen Suggs. As we mentioned earlier, Wendell Carter Jr. I feel like the list just kind of goes on, and added a key piece, I would say, this in this offseason. So, Connor, I'll let you take that away and maybe go over some of their losses as well.
Yes. Yeah, so they're losing Markel Fultz, Chuma Okeke, and Joe Ingles. Obviously, I think the biggest loss there is Markel Fultz. I think he played the most, the most efficient for him or for them. The other two didn't get a whole lot of playing time. But they added Kentavious Caldwell Pope, notorious for being a really good 3-and-D player. I like the fit. Because I think they needed another wing player. But just so people know kind of what the forward/guard situation is looking like they got Jalen Suggs, Anthony Black, Cole Anthony, Gary Harris, Franz Wagner, and Paulo, and then Jonathan Isaac, of course. But yeah, I think the Magic are probably going to have to figure out a rotation for these guys. They're probably going to have to figure out who do we not want to make mad by not giving them minutes? Because you have a lot of young players that you want to get experience. But obviously, being fifth in the East and almost upsetting the Cavs last year in the playoffs, it's kind of like, or do we want KCP, who is a veteran, who's proven that he can hit shots when he needs to, he can play defense. I think they have a lot to juggle. at the beginning of the season.
I agree. I just think this KCP signing was huge for this team, to be honest. I mean, obviously, we know KCP not only helped the Denver Nuggets win a championship a couple of years ago, but also helped the Lakers win a championship back during COVID times. Great 3-and-D guy. I mean, shoots over 40% from the 3-point line. Great defender. Has played 30 plus minutes the past couple of years as well, and it's just been such a good piece for the Denver Nuggets and the Lakers back when they had them. And I think it's kind of perfect for this because you have the emergence, you have your two guys in Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero, but now you just have that consistent shooter. You can put him in the corner, have him spot up as needed on the offensive side of thing in KCP. Then obviously he can be on the best guard on the other team as well. But I think you hit it on the head as well. This is a young team, so they do have a lot of pieces that they're going to want to get minutes with. But another guy I want to mention quickly, Jonathan Isaac. Now, he has dealt with a ton of injuries in his career. I mean, he only played over 50 games 2 times in his 7-year career. One was in his sophomore season, and then last year he played 58 games. So coming back from a huge injury, I think he actually has the ability to play a key role backing up Paolo Banchero there at the power forward position. May play a little small forward as well beside him if they want to go really big. But I just think he might actually get some good minutes and help get some good run this season. I'm really liking what I see from the Magic this year. I think they had a good offseason, a great signing in KCP. So I'm putting them as a playoff lock for sure. Now, do I think they're going to get any higher than a 5 seed? I think they're going to be in the 4 and 5 range, but I like what I see from the Magic, and I think they're going to keep it going this year.
Yeah, 100% a playoff lock for this team. I feel like everyone just always just discounts the Magic, Like it just always seems like no one is expecting much, and then I feel like they're consistently at least making the playoffs, if not being like a bubble playoff team. Obviously, last year I really don't think anyone was expecting the 5 seed, but there they were. But yeah, like you said, I guess like we both said, do they want to get some younger guys some minutes? Because so they did lose Markel Fultz as previously mentioned, but I think they have some players that they're expecting to kind of take on his production off the bench. You got Anthony Black or Cole Anthony, whichever one you want to put on the bench or to come off the bench. Who I think can produce just as much or better than what Markel Fultz did. But yeah, Jonathan Isaac, definitely an interesting player. So last season was the most games he's played since 2018. So he played 75 games his sophomore season. And then he has, up until last season, he hadn't played more than 34 games, missing an entire season with his injuries. But yeah, he's definitely a player that I think has some good foundations for this team. And he's kind of a player where, at least defensively, he was able to slide wherever he was needed, but you kind of wonder, after injuries, his athleticism starts slacking off. Where are they going to put him full time? Just because he had that ability to be such like a dynamic player before all of his injuries. But yeah, I'm excited for this team. I think people are starting to realize, this isn't just a pushover team. This is someone that we can expect will compete night in and night out.
Yeah, I agree. Do want to ask you a quick question. Paolo Banchero obviously was an all-star last year. We thinking he's going to have another all-star like season and continue to just kind of keep improving and keep growing as we've seen the past couple of seasons?
Yeah. I mean, I think we all know, he's a crazy scorer. Before his rookie year, he was only expected to be the 3rd pick, and then all of a sudden, like draft day, he shoots up to the number 1 pick, and people thought, they were crazy for taking him number 1. But he's proven people wrong. He's played 72 games his rookie year. He played 80 last year. Obviously, he has had some trouble with his efficiency. which I do want to say he improved from his rookie to sophomore year, but he's by no means great efficiently yet. But hopefully he can take that step to be, producing points, and stats, but also doing it efficiently so that he is helping his team in the best way possible. Um, but yeah, I think if he puts up numbers like he did last year, I'm expecting another All-Star game.
Yeah. Hey, I agree. I think, rookie of the year, obviously his rookie year, and then all-star in his sophomore season. I think we're going to see another all-star appearance in the third year and keep seeing those splits go up. We saw a big jump in his three-point percentage, jumping up from around 30% to 34%. I think we're going to continue to see that. And then also, I think he's going to even go up in his scoring, going maybe more around 25 points per game this year. I think he's going to need that type of season for them to have the success that we're expecting, and obviously I expect it. So I like what I see from the Orlando Magic. I think they had a great offseason, and hopefully they can continue to have that good of a year come this NBA season. But we'll go ahead and jump into the last team we got for today's episode. This one might be one of the hardest teams to talk about. We got the Washington Wizards. Last season finished 14th in the East with a record of 15-67. They did return a good amount of pieces and had a few additions and losses in free agency. So, Connor, I'll let you go over that and then give me your expectations for what the Wizards are going to look like this year.
Yes, best team in the league. Well, obviously, most notable player that I'm going to highlight, Alex Sarr, believe number 2 pick in the draft. Then they also got Bub Carrington from the draft. They got Malcolm Brogdon from a trade. They signed Sadiq Bey. And they got Jonas Valanciunas. So they have a center from a sign and trade. But part of the trade that they did lose Denny Avdija. I'm butchering his name. But and they lost Tyus Jones, which Tyus Jones is known for being a pretty efficient point guard. Yeah, I think this is going to be another learning year for the Wizards. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to say in terms of their losses. I mean, you lost arguably your best player who last year. I think your center improved, which is good.
Hey, they got a pretty efficient point guard now in Jordan Poole, right?
Oh my gosh, dude. No, I'm about to hang up. No.
All right, hey, let's talk about the Wizards, all right? So they got Jordan Poole, they got Malcolm Brogdon now, so we're making some steps maybe. Hey, I will say they actually had a decent offseason for the Wizards. Nothing that's going to take them out of being a team that's just going to absolutely tank for that number 1 pick, in my opinion. But you get Alex Sarr from the draft, who a lot of people thought was going to be the number 1 pick, and he slid down to 2. Probably wasn't the right fit in Atlanta, and also there were rumors he didn't want to go there, but for some reason he wanted to go to Washington. So there you go. Didn't see a lot of flashes in the summer league from him, but hey, the number 2 pick, he's got to be something. We also got Malcolm Brogdon from a trade. We saw Brogdon play well in Indiana and Boston, last year being in Portland, but we've seen him play well before, so he might be able to bring something there. Sadiq Bey, getting him out of free agency, that could actually be a good get. He has played well in the past as well. But I think the biggest of all, as you mentioned, got a center, Jonas Valanciunas, and a sign and trade. Losing Denny is going to hurt. I think he's going to do really well next year in Portland. But I will say it was a net positive for the Wizards. I don't see them going 15-67. This season, I see them going more like 17-65 type thing. So we're moving up a couple of wins, maybe get to the 20-win mark. But for the Wizards to have any success, they're going to need to start hitting on some of these picks and some of these young guys, right? Jordan Poole showed a lot when he's with the Warriors. Now he comes to the Wizards, and sometimes it doesn't even look like he knows how to play basketball, which hurts me because I like Jordan Poole, but that's changed. Last year, they drafted Bilal Coulibaly. he was very much an upside pick, so maybe we see him take that second year jump as a sophomore. He played in 63 games last year, but did not have the best type of performances, only averaged, 8.5 points per game. But who knows? We can see him take a lot of steps because as we do for people in the sophomore year. Kyle Kuzma, that's the one I will say that has been very solid for the Wizards. I actually really like Kuzma. I think he's had maybe his best seasons with the Wizards so far. And I continue to see him, going up. Who knows? Maybe Kyle Kuzma might have an all-star like year this year and get them to the mid-20s and wins. I don't know. I mean, last season averaged around 22 points per game. Was hitting some threes, pretty good field goal percentage and 46%. We could see Kyle Kuzma take another little step up. But I think they added some good pieces and, should be optimistic that they're going to do better than they were last year. But then again, just with how loaded some of these other teams are, I can't see them making it into the play-in.
Yeah. I have them in tanking for flag, which might be more on the organization rather than the players and the coach wanting to do that.
Okay.
We've seen organizations influence what players play, that sort of thing. But I would say Kyle Kuzma has been one of the players that has just flown under the radar the past couple of seasons. I think, like you said, 22 points a game last year. He's been playing really well. The team as a whole was not playing well, but he was one bright spot for them. I know Jordan Poole, in terms of media, kind of took away from that because people were so infatuated with making memes and, like highlight reels about him. But I think Kyle Kuzma, he's an interesting piece that I wonder if they trade. Because he's not exactly a young player anymore. He's been in the league for more than a few seasons. He's finally playing really good basketball, which I think he's an interesting trade target for teams.
I agree, and that could be someone that we see come trade deadline, in February, that they move on from him because, he wants something a little better, wants to go to a team that's actually going to contend, and they can get some younger pieces back. One quick question I have for you for the Wizards, specifically Alex Sarr. Are we expecting Alex Sarr to be better or worse than Zachary Risachet? Because I feel like this might be a hot debate where the 1 and 2 picks in the NBA draft this year, I don't think are going to win Rookie of the Years, but I'm just curious, which one do you think is going to be better?
Yeah, honestly, I think Alex Sarr is probably in a better position to succeed. I know the Wizards have Bagley and Holmes on their roster. Obviously, we already mentioned the other center that they signed, but I think he has the best chance to carve a role out for himself. And then honestly, I feel like just centers tend to have an easier time transitioning to the league than other positions do, just because they're typically not asked to do as much.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would go Alex Sarr as well, but I will say from what we saw in the summer league, Alex Sarr struggled. So hoping that they can get him right here in the offseason before the season starts, but we'll have to see. Have to tune into some of the preseason games to check it out as well. But I think we're both in agreement. Take him for flag for this one. And definitely a jersey that we could see Cooper Flag in next year.
What are you expecting from Bub Carrington? Are you expecting him to get significant minutes? I mean, they spent the 14th draft pick on him.
Significant minutes? Maybe. I don't necessarily think they have anybody that I'm sitting here like, you have to play him over him. Do I think he's going to start? Probably not, but I definitely think he's going to be in the rotation. Bub Carrington, I feel like, is another one of those picks, kind of like Koulibaly, where it's really all about the upside, right? Like coming out last season early on, weren't really, or during his college years, we weren't necessarily aware that he was going to get drafted. And then all of a sudden he kind of just started balling out and, ends up coming to the NBA and becomes a lottery pick. Then goes over to the summer league, plays really well in the summer league. Actually, was like 16 points per game in 30 minutes, so not bad splits there. So I think he gets some good minutes. I actually could see Bub Carrington have a better season than Alex Sarr this year, which it really wouldn't surprise me if that happened.
Yeah, not surprising. Um, but I will say I think he has a pretty good veteran with Malcolm Brogdon there. I know Brogdon has kind of, I feel like he's flipped back and forth between being the primary ball handler and playing off ball at times. Um, but honestly, I think when he's at point guard, I think Brogdon's really good. And I think he could be maybe, a good veteran for Carrington.
For sure. And for Jordan Poole, right?
Okay, hold on. I just want to clarify something about Jordan Poole. I think if he's used properly, I think he can be a phenomenal player. But I think the way the Warriors and the Wizards have used him, I don't think has been the best opportunity for him to showcase.
Okay, come on. You don't think the year that the Golden State Warriors beat the Celtics, 2022, you don't think Jordan Poole was used correctly that year when he balled out in the playoffs?
I think that Jordan Poole was, I think that there were other players who carried that Warriors team to the championship. In case you forgot, they do have Steph Curry on that team. But yeah, obviously, I think there's also a lot of drama in the locker room, and whether you want to put that on Draymond or on Jordan Poole, up to you. Regardless, he was involved in the drama.
Hey, very true. But I'm just hoping we see another pool party this year. If it's not in Golden State, I hope it's in Washington.
I think sixth man, come in, score a few points a game, perfect. But I think when you're asking him to shoot 20 shots a game, I don't think that's a good way to use him.
Well, hey, they got Brogdon now, so we'll have to see how he's used. He could slide over, be a starting point guard, maybe starting shooting guard, or the sixth man. I feel like they have a lot of options, so we'll have to see how they do it. But I think that's all we had for today's episode. Connor, anything else you want to drop before we go ahead and end today's podcast?
No, I think that's all. Maybe that, man, we're getting close. We are in the month that the NBA season starts, just a couple weeks away. I'm getting excited. I'm just getting pumped for the NBA season.
That's right. As he mentioned, October is the month. The NBA starts with opening day, October 22nd, and we will have a podcast that drops that day actually to cover the opening day and what our expectations and predictions are for the season, so you don't want to miss it. But we also have a few more of these episodes. I think we'll have 3 more that drop, and so you might be getting 2 episodes a week, who knows, coming up throughout before the NBA season starts. So make sure to tune in there. But again, as always, we really appreciate everyone tuning in and watching and listening. If you're still watching, please hit that like button and make sure to subscribe on YouTube. And if you're on any of the podcast platforms, as always, make sure to give us a 5-star rating and leave a comment. We'd love to hear, love to talk, and go off any questions or anything that you have. But I think that's all we got for today. So we'll see you next time, Courtside. Peace.
Peace.